So the difference between an anti-hero and an edgy character is I think anti-hero is like a specific categorization of a character's like morality and their like impact in the world when it comes to their actions and what they do and their goals. Whereas an edgy character has nothing to do about the specific things that a character necessarily stands for or what they want, but it's just that they're like very self-serious and very insistently dark. So I think a really good example of like an edgy character that we can like agree on, almost I think without argument, is Sasuke. Sasuke is like super edgy. I feel like Sasuke is the definition of like an edgy character. And edgy doesn't necessarily, I think, have to do with any one specific type of quality. Edgy is kind of like a feeling that comes from a character, again, being self-serious when the narrative that they're in might not necessarily call for it. And edginess a lot of the times has to deal with like melodrama. And melodrama in a fiction can be understood as when either the audience or the person like interacting with the fiction is called upon to feel emotions that they have not yet had like a valid reason to feel, or if a character in the fiction has over dramatized emotions, right? So if, for example, in my own writing, which was really bad at the start, I had an entire section of my book be about like this guy mourning his family that was killed. Sure, he could do that and he could mourn seriously, but none of the people reading my book knew these characters that were dead. So like, why would they care? Like, why would I start out my book trying to get people to empathize with a dude they didn't know about people that they didn't care about? Sasuke is terribly written, kills me how much potential he had. I honestly have forgotten more than I know about Naruto. If we want to think about melodrama and edgy characters, Sasuke would be one of them, because like he just wants to be perceived as dangerous and cool and dark all the time. And that's like kind of like what an edgy character is. I think another example from Naruto is early Gaara. Gaara at the start was like very insistent on being perceived as someone who like, you know, was emotionless, impenetrable, would kill you, you can't get on their bad side. And that's kind of like what also Edge has to do within a lot of characters. It's like, you know, they're being perceived as dangerous and unknowable and dark, but it's like, it's not because they are those things. Maybe not exclusively, but because like want you to feel that way and they tell you about it. I would say Combustion Man is similar to Gaara, but not necessarily edgy. I would say that Combustion Man, because of his lack of dialogue and just being focused on actions, he isn't edgy, he literally is just threatening. Like he is just dark and sinister, everything that he just presents to be, and you don't feel like you're being told to perceive him that way or that the narrative is like trying to drive you in that direction. He just is. I think another great example of this are the twins from Breaking Bad. I think these two characters, I guess if you want to call them edgy, you could. But like, I personally don't see them as edgy. I just see them as, again, efficient, dark, kind of like mysterious. An anti-hero was someone who wants, outcomes that would be considered good, but who goes about them in like immoral ways, right? So Venom. I think Venom in a lot of cases ends up wanting to do good things. Like if he's like the comic book anti-hero, but he ends up like killing a ton of people to like do it. Pretty much any time someone believes I'm going to do good, but I don't necessarily care who I harm to do the good. You have people like freaking from Suicide Squad where he's like, I love freedom and I don't care how many like men, women, and children I have to kill to get it. Peacemaker. Peacemaker, I think, is less of an anti-hero and which is kind of like a straight villain, because I think there is the whole difference is that for a character who wants to do good, everyone has a different perception of good, and some characters think they're doing good, but they're actually just doing evil, versus characters who actually want to accomplish some good, right? So I would say like initially, you know, before the events of his show, Peacemaker was probably just like a villain and not an anti-hero, even though he wanted freedom for people. I don't think that necessarily amounted to actually wanting to do good things for people. Thanos is an anti-hero. That is also, again, because this is all like spectrum based. And like you could make the argument Thanos is an anti-hero, but I don't necessarily know how good it would be, because like Thanos isn't doing it, I would say, really because of truly moral reasons. Wait, what about Kratos? Kratos was super edgy. So so like Kratos in God of War 3 was like as edgy as he ever was. Like literally just look at him. Like there's almost no way to be more edgy than Kratos was. Now, was he actually terrifying, intimidating, and in pain and tormented? Sure. And could you also make the argument that he was an anti-hero? I would say after the discovery of the Pandora's box in God of War 3, I think he turned into an anti-hero. But I think before that, Kratos was completely selfish. He didn't have like an altruistic moral bone in his body. He just wanted revenge. Like he wasn't doing good for other people. I think Kratos in Ragnarok is neither an anti-hero nor edgy. I think Kratos in Ragnarok is just a genuinely good person. I think he's tormented. I think he's very sad and stoic and somber, but I don't think he's an anti-hero because I don't think he goes about doing things. In fact, he's incredibly restrained, and I don't think he's edgy because I don't think he is asking you or demanding you or other people inside the fiction to like see how dangerous he is, see how hurt he is, see how traumatized he is. Thanos is an anti-villain. That honestly might be a more apt description if we're thinking about just like categorizations. He is a villain, and he's a villain who wants what he perceives to be altruistic things. But like if you have any type of like literacy when it comes to storytelling in a critical way, you'll be able to see that like Thanos doesn't really care about helping people in the way that he says he does, because he's very complicated. Because if Thanos effectively becomes omnipotent, there are a plethora of other ways that he could go about achieving like universal equity and like balancing the scales, right? Because in his mind, he thinks I have to wipe out half of the population because resources are finite, but also to teach people that it can be done, to put the fear in them that this type of repercussion is what happens from the overuse of resources. Again, he has infinite power. There are tons and tons of other ways he could went about doing it, and we see that the reason that he does what he does is because he wants the power. He wants to be the person that changes the universe for what it is. And I think that's why he doesn't necessarily care about helping people. Helping people is his ruse in order to gain power. I think much in the same way, like Yagami, kind of like an anti-villain. He's much closer to just being a pure villain, but like Light's whole goal is I want to get rid of criminality, but I want to be the god of the new world. He's just like Thanos. I think Light, funny enough, ends up winning and succeeding in a way that Thanos doesn't, because I'm pretty sure like crime does just fall. I think Light actually does succeed in making like a world where there is much less crime, but he's not any less corrupt for doing it. Light wouldn't necessarily be edgy up until the point of his defeat. And sorry for spoilers. Yeah, so like in this moment, Light becomes edgy when he's finally beaten. But I would not call him an anti-hero. I think he would just be, he's either a villain or an anti-villain. Would Vegeta be seen as an anti-hero in the Cell Saga, or an edgy character who had a negative change arc with the last second redemption? Vegeta is interesting because Vegeta is always kind of edgy. Vegeta might be like the perfect edgy character. I think Vegeta is always, well, up until the point where he like goes like full domestic, I think he's almost like always an anti-hero. He's 100% an anti-hero in the Namek Saga. I cannot remember, because the Cell Saga is when he becomes Majin. No, that's the Majin. Because I remember he achieves like, what is it, Super Vegeta, and then he allows Cell to become perfect, thinking that he'll beat him. Yeah, so that wasn't the Majin. But yeah, I would say Vegeta is an anti-hero up until the point where he just becomes like a real true hero, like, you know, with Bulma and Trunks and all that kind of stuff. I think he devotes himself to humanity pretty openly after that. The fact that Death Note doesn't even show us how better the world got without crime just goes to show that Light doesn't give a about it. We are following his POV after all. I think that's they focus like very briefly on it, like for like 2 minutes of an episode, I think, where they do the time skip. But yeah, it's not a part, I think, of Light's real end goal. It's kind of like his justification for wanting power. Vegeta all edgy till he gets his whoops, yeah. I've seen people say that Thanos could have created more resources. He definitely could have, and that's kind of like my point, is that like Thanos, the way you justify it narratively is that he believes that they wouldn't solve anything. He believes that creating more resources would just incentivize people to use more and more. He wanted to kill people in order to show them that there was consequences for their actions. And again, this is what I'm talking about when it comes down to like, is someone like an anti-hero or not? Because I don't think that's, even an anti-hero wouldn't do that. I think the anti-hero would just be like, I will kill people to get the Infinity Stones, and then you have the Infinity Stones to make infinite resources. You know, teach people, like, have the thoughts in their mind to be resource conscious. Thanos didn't want to do that. He wanted power. He wanted to be able to have like manifestations over destruction. What makes an anti-villain? Never heard of this before. An anti-villain is a character who has noble or just goals but uses evil or questionable means to achieve them. Anti-villains are complex character types that challenges are understood of right and wrong and the balance between intentions and actions, right? So you can think of like an anti-villain. Honestly, it might be easier to like think of anti-hero first and then contrast it to anti-villain, right? So like an anti-hero would, again, be someone who like wants good and moral things, which again is completely subjective, but does immoral things to get those good things. So again, like, you know, like a Deadpool type, where it's just like, yeah, I will kill people to get what I want, but what I want is ultimately good in almost like a ends justify the means type things. An anti-villain is someone who you recognize, oh, you're just a bad person, but you want good things for other people. And the villainy is a key characteristic of the actions that you take, right? So personally, I would honestly count like Obito as an anti-villain, right? So the reason I would count this is actually, before we do Obito, let me just go to like Steppenwolf from like DC. Okay, so if you remember this, the Steppenwolf before the Snyder Cut, there was a section of time where Steppenwolf was described as like he lived only to conquer, right? So Steppenwolf wanted to kill people, and he killed people literally just to kill people and to conquer and to have power, right? So this would be kind of like a true villain. There's like no moral complexity like whatsoever. He's just an evil guy. But then you get to like Obito, and again, sorry for spoilers if you're behind on a show that came out like a decade ago. Obito's plan was like, hey, the world sucks and people don't know how to operate and there's so much pain that I'm going to create a infinite genjutsu, an infinite illusion where everyone can live in paradise, but it'll be like fake, but in their minds it'll be real. So like everyone will feel like they're in paradise, and I'm going to essentially take away free will. I would count Obito as an anti-villain. He is still obviously villainous, but his goals are for the betterment, what he believes, for the betterment of everybody. But he doesn't even delude himself into thinking that he's a hero. He knows he's a villain. Like he purposely allies with other villains because he knows he has to do these things in order to be able to achieve like what he again considers an actually good true goal. So yeah, so like this would be, I think, like my difference between like an edgy character, an anti-villain, and like an anti-hero, because I do think there's like distinct and fundamental differences between them, even though I think they're pretty subtle. But yeah, very good question.